The sun, a relentless, molten eye, seared the desert floor, baking the air into a shimmering mirage. You stood at the window of the border patrol station in the desert, the glass vibrating faintly with the drone of the ancient air conditioning unit, a futile protest against the furnace outside. Dust devils danced in the distance, spectral columns rising from the parched earth, mirroring the swirling chaos that often felt trapped inside you. This was your penance, Marcus Thorne. This stark, unforgiving landscape, a million miles from the labyrinthine streets where you once hunted shadows. The scent of stale coffee and disinfectant clung to the air, a constant companion. Your uniform, too crisp, too clean for a man who once thrived in the grime of the city's underbelly, felt like a costume. You watched a lone coyote skulk along the horizon, a phantom against the vast expanse, and for a moment, you saw yourself in its solitary prowl. Disgraced, stripped of the badge that had been your very identity, you had sought refuge in anonymity, in the dull, predictable rhythm of a life devoid of consequence. Each sunrise here was a fresh coat of sand over the unburied past, a futile attempt to forget the journalist, the cold case that had splintered your career into irreparable fragments. The creak of the office door behind you shattered the fragile quiet. You didn't turn immediately. You knew the sound, the familiar shuffle of a colleague, the quiet hum of mundane tasks. But the footsteps that followed were different, measured, deliberate, too polished for the desert. A subtle shift in the air, a faint scent of expensive cologne clashing with the desert's raw breath. Marcus Thorne? The voice was smooth, a low baritone that resonated with an authority you hadn't heard in years. You turned, slowly, the movement a studied casualness. Standing in the doorway was a man in a tailored suit, a stark black against the muted browns of the station. His silver hair was meticulously combed, his eyes, sharp and assessing, met yours without a flicker. He held a slim briefcase, its leather gleaming. He looked utterly out of place, like a diamond dropped into a sandpit. "That's me," you replied, your voice gravelly, and used to such formal exchanges. You didn't offer a hand. Your eyes scanned him, searching for the telltale signs of a federal agent, a lawyer, a politician. He wore none of the usual markers, yet radiated a quiet power that was unmistakable. "My apologies for the intrusion," the stranger said, his gaze sweeping over the Spartan office, lingering briefly on the faded map tacked to the wall, then returning to you. "I understand your current arrangement here is not one you sought out." A muscle twitched in your jaw. "It is what it is." The words tasted like dust. He nodded, a slight, almost imperceptible gesture. "Indeed. But sometimes, what is, can be changed. Or, at the very least, re-evaluated." He stepped further into the room, stopping a few feet from your desk, which was littered with standard forms and a half-empty mug of cooling coffee. "I represent certain interests. Interests that believe a particular injustice demands reconsideration." You narrowed your eyes. "Injustice is a broad term. This desert is full of them. This one, however, is personal to you, Marcus Thorne." He opened the briefcase with a soft click, revealing not documents, but a single, laminated photograph. He slid it across the desk. Your gaze fell upon it. The world tilted. It was her. The journalist. Her smile, vibrant and defiant, stared back at you from the glossy surface. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, seemed to hold a challenge even in death. The image was old, from her professional headshot, the one plastered across every news outlet when the story broke, then faded, then vanished entirely. Her name was Sarah Vance, you stated, the name a ghost on your tongue. Murdered. Case closed. Random act of violence. End of story. You pushed the photograph back across the desk with a finger, the anger. Dormant for so long, beginning to stir. What about it? We believe it was anything but random, the stranger countered, his voice still unnervingly calm. And certainly not the end of the story. He retrieved the photo, tucking it back into the briefcase. The original investigation, led by you, was prematurely curtailed. Pressures from above. Information suppressed. A narrative forced. You clenched your fists, the knuckles white. He was speaking truths you'd buried deep, truths that had eaten away at you from the inside. Why now, you demanded, your voice tight. It's been years. A new development, he explained, his eyes unwavering. The current political landscape, specifically the ascent of a certain presidential candidate, has brought new information to light. Information that links Sarah Vance's death directly to his campaign, and to a presidential candidate. An influential organization. This was no longer just about Sarah. This was bigger, far bigger than the tangled web you tried to unravel all those years ago. The pieces, once scattered and meaningless, suddenly felt like they were trying to align, forming a terrifying mosaic. You're telling me her murder wasn't just a random street crime, you said, the words heavy with the weight of old accusations. Because of what she knew. Precisely, the stranger confirmed. And we believe you are the only one who truly understood the threads he was pulling on. The only one who saw past the convenient narrative. You pursued the truth, Marcus Thorne, even when it cost you everything. He paused, letting the words hang in the air, a silent challenge. We want you to pursue it again. You looked out the window again, at the endless, indifferent desert. The sun was beginning its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery hues. Redemption. To step back into that world, to confront the ghosts, the powerful enemies, the agonizing truth about the murder that had defined your downfall. It was a terrifying prospect. But the image of Sarah Vance, her defiant smile, flickered behind your eyes. The injustice. The lie. The unfinished business. What's the catch, you asked, turning back to him, your gaze hardening. The weariness was still there, but beneath it, a spark, long extinguished, had begun to glow. A determined glint in your eyes that had been absent for too long. The stranger offered a faint, almost imperceptible smile. Only that you find the truth, Marcus Thorne. All of it. He placed a small, discreet card on your desk. We will provide the resources. You provide the resolve. You picked up the card. It bore no name, only a symbol, a stylized, intricate knot, and a single, untraceable phone number. The weight of it in your hand felt immense, a tangible link to the world you had abandoned, a world now reaching out to pull you back into its deadly embrace. The desert wind howled softly outside, a mournful lament, or perhaps, a call to arms. The past was not buried. It was waiting. And you, Marcus Thorne, were about to answer. The intricate knot symbol seemed to pulse with a faint, unseen energy, a silent challenge to the resignation that had become your second skin. The untraceable number, stark against the thick cardstock, was an invitation, a dangerous whisper in the vast, empty expanse of your self-imposed exile. You traced the raised edges of the symbol, a phantom limb of your past reaching out, tugging at the frayed edges of a memory you had tried to bury beneath layers of guilt and dust. The decision was not born of hope, not yet. It was a cold, calculated curiosity, a sliver of ice in the furnace of your regret. A need for answers, perhaps, or merely the grim recognition that some debts, even those paid in disgrace, still demanded interest. Your thumb hovered over the phone's worn keypad, the digits of the untraceable number a sequence of fate. The wind outside rattled the single pane of glass in your small dwelling, mimicking the tremor in your hand as you pressed the final digit. A single ring, then a click. The voice that answered was smooth, devoid of inflection, yet it carried the undeniable weight of authority, a quiet power that resonated even through the crackle of the satellite connection. Marcus Thorne, it stated, not a question, but a confirmation. You offered no greeting, no pleasantry. You sent a card. We require your particular expertise, the voice continued, ignoring your bluntness. A matter of unfinished business. The journalist. The name hung in the air, a ghost. The journalist. The case that had unraveled your world, the unsolved murder that had carved a chasm between you and the badge you once wore with pride. Dead. Not anymore, the voice countered, a subtle shift in tone, a promise of something far more complex than simple resurrection. A meeting has been arranged. The line went dead. The stark, functional architecture of the station stood in stark contrast to the endless, undulating dunes. Inside, the air hummed with the muted thrum of officialdom, the low murmur of voices, and the distant clang of metal. You were led through a series of sterile corridors, past uniformed personnel whose gazes lingered for a beat too long, their expressions unreadable. They knew who you were, or at least, who you had been. In a small, windowless office, starkly lit by fluorescent panels, a figure sat behind a metal desk. The individual, a handler, was impeccably dressed in a tailored suit that seemed out of place in this dusty outpost. Their face was composed, eyes sharp and assessing. They offered no hand, no smile, simply a gesture towards the chair opposite. Marcus Thorne, the handler began, their voice calm, precise, a mirror of the one on the phone. We believe you are the only one capable of untangling this thread. The original investigation, while flawed in its conclusion, was thorough in its initial groundwork. You know the victim better than anyone. You leaned forward, the scent of antiseptic and old coffee sharp in the air. The conclusion wasn't flawed. It was sabotaged. And you know it. Your voice was a low growl, the embers of old anger flaring. The handler's gaze did not waver. Precisely why we need you. The official narrative requires adjustment. The journalist's death, once dismissed as a random act of violence, has become inconveniently linked to certain developing situations. A prominent politician's current presidential campaign, for instance. A flicker of something, not hope, but a grim satisfaction ignited within you. This was it. The thread. The reason they were pulling you back. What kind of link? The handler pushed a worn leather satchel across the desk. Its weight was substantial. All the files from the original investigation. And a supplemental dossier. New information. You will find the connections yourself. Our resources are at your disposal, but discretion is paramount. Your official status remains retired. This is off the books, Mr. Thorne. Should you succeed, your name might finally be cleared. The promise of redemption, or perhaps just the tantalizing possibility of finally knowing the truth, was a lure you couldn't resist. The taste of it was bitter, yet compelling. I'll need access. Untraceable. And I'll work alone. Understood, the handler conceded, a ghost of a nod. Your contact details have been updated. You will receive further instructions. Begin your review. Back in the solitude of your desolate dwelling, the desert wind still wailing its ancient song, you emptied the satchel onto your battered table. The files spilled forth, manila folders brittle with age, faded crime scene photos, witness statements typed on onion skin paper, your own handwritten notes scrawled in the margins. You started with the victim's profile, Elias Vance, the investigative journalist. Brilliant, relentless, too good at digging up dirt in places where it was meant to stay buried. You remembered his face from the grainy photos, the keen intelligence in his eyes. He had been close to something big, even then. Too close. Methodically, you sifted through the initial reports, the autopsy findings, the interviews. You remembered the dead ends, the convenient disappearances of witnesses, the official pressure to close the case quickly. It had reeked of a cover-up, even to your younger, more naive self. Then, the supplemental dossier. Newer, crisper pages. You found a printout of an article, recently published, detailing the rise of a certain presidential candidate, a man whose rhetoric was as polished as his image. Your eyes narrowed. The name of that firm, vague and fleeting, sparked a memory. You flipped back through the old files, searching. And there it was, a barely legible note in your own handwriting, tucked into a preliminary interview transcript from the Vance case, a tip, unverified, about Elias Vance having received a threat, vaguely linking it to a corporate PAC involved in local infrastructure projects. The name of that PAC, though generic, had a familiar ring now. The pieces didn't fit perfectly, not yet, but the edges were starting to align. The knot symbol from the card, you realized, was not just an emblem, it was a warning. You were already entangled. Manila folders, brittle as autumn leaves, lay splayed across the battered table. Faded crime scene photos, their reds muted to rust, showed a chaos you remembered too well, the overturned desk, the scattered papers, the shattered glass. Your own hurried notes, scrawled years ago, felt like the frantic cries of a younger, more naive self. Marcus Thorne, you thought, this time you would see beyond the surface. The old apartment, once a vibrant hub of investigation, now stood hollowed and forgotten, a skeletal structure clinging to the city's edge. Dust motes danced in the anemic shafts of light that pierced the grimy windows, illuminating the ghosts of furniture long since removed. The air hung thick with the scent of decay and neglect, a silent testament to time's indifference. You moved through the rooms, a phantom yourself, your boots echoing on the bare floorboards where once a brilliant mind had wrestled with truths. The police tape, faded to a faint peach, still clung stubbornly to a doorframe, a forgotten marker of a crime scene officially closed, but far from resolved. You knelt by the scarred floorboards near where the journalist's body had been found. But the scene always felt too tidy for true randomness, too deliberate in its destruction. Your fingers traced the faint indentations on the sill of a back window, near an old fire escape. Not forced entry, you mused, but perhaps controlled entry. A subtle detail, overlooked by the initial sweep, by you. Hours dissolved into a meticulous hunt. You ran your hands over every surface, every crevice, seeking an anomaly. The cheap, built-in bookshelf, still affixed to the wall, drew your attention. Most of the books were gone, but a few forgotten volumes remained, wedged deep. Your fingers brushed against the spine of a slim, leather-bound volume, an obscure collection of forgotten desert folklore. It felt heavier than it should. You pulled it free, the leather worn smooth beneath your thumb. It was old, intricate, unlike any standard house key. This was no random act. This was a message, meticulously hidden. The first lead took you far from the city's concrete veins, deep into the sun-baked expanse of the borderlands. His face, once smooth and youthful, was now a landscape of sun-weathered lines, his eyes narrowed against the glare. Thorne, the supervisor greeted, his voice a low rumble, devoid of warmth. He leaned against a sand-blasted utility vehicle, arms crossed over a chest that seemed to have expanded with the years and the weight of the desert's solitude. Thought you were long gone. Swallowed by the sand. Some things refuse to stay buried, you countered, meeting his gaze. I'm looking into the journalist's case. Closed. Nothing to see there. Random robbery gone bad, wasn't it? His tone was flat, too flat. Was it? You pressed, watching him. You were first on scene. Anything feel? Some files are best left sealed. Some graves. Undisturbed. His voice dropped, a barely audible warning against the incessant whine of the desert wind. You start digging up old bones, you attract buzzards. Big ones. Was there anything specific you remember from that night, before the official reports came down, you asked, ignoring the veiled threat. Any early impressions? He stared out at the shimmering horizon, his jaw tight. Just a feeling. Like the whole thing was too neat. Too clean for a junkie's grab. But I wrote my report, and that was that. Orders from above. He turned back to you, his eyes holding a stark warning. Don't go chasing ghosts, Thorne. And they were not about to lose again. The silence of the rented room, a temporary sanctuary, hums with the weight of unsaid truths. You sit amidst the scattered remnants of another's life, the journalist's meticulously organized chaos. Your fingers, calloused from years of gripping a badge and a gun, now trace the delicate lines of ink on paper, the faint impressions of a pen pressed too hard. The air is thick with the scent of old paper and the metallic tang of your own resolve. You found it, tucked beneath a false bottom in a worn leather satchel, not a literal key, but a data stick, no larger than your thumb, disguised as a mundane memory drive. Its contents, encrypted, had yielded only after hours of your focused, almost desperate, effort. Now, a low hum emanates from the screen before you, illuminating your determined face with its stark, blue light. The victim's research unfurls like a dark tapestry. There, in stark relief, is the politician's campaign, not just a distant entity, but a specific initiative, a sweeping border security bill, promising prosperity and protection. And woven through every thread of this legislative ambition, a name repeats, a silent, powerful echo, Ethelred Industries. You recognize the name. A conglomerate, ostensibly involved in infrastructure and logistics, its tendrils reaching into every corner of national development. The journalist's notes meticulously detail their proposed contracts, the staggering sums involved, the potential for unparalleled influence should the politicians' bill pass. It's a nexus of power, a confluence of political ambition and corporate greed, all funneling into the same dry riverbed. The journalist wasn't just reporting, they were exposing a carefully constructed edifice of control. This wasn't a random act of violence. The journalist's death was a deliberate silencing, a brutal punctuation mark in a narrative of corruption that threatened to unravel the very fabric of justice. The orders from above, the supervisor's hushed warnings, they suddenly gain a terrifying clarity. You were not just pursuing a killer, you were disturbing a viper's nest. The journalist had been tracking something there, a crucial piece of the puzzle, a clandestine operation perhaps, linked to Ethelred Industries' purported security solutions. Your instinct screams, a silent alarm bell ringing in the quiet room. You need to go there. You need to see what they saw. The air shimmers above the asphalt, distorting the skeletal forms of cacti and the distant, jagged mountains. Dust devils dance across the desolate landscape, miniature cyclones of grit and forgotten promises. The station itself is a collection of low, functional buildings, baked orange by the relentless sun, surrounded by a chain-link fence that seems to offer more suggestion than actual security. The heat presses down, a physical weight, but your focus is a laser beam. You carry a fabricated story, a cover, a reason to be here, to sift through the archives, to speak to the old-timers who might remember a lone journalist asking inconvenient questions. Inside, the cool, conditioned air is a welcome shock. A uniformed officer, his face etched with years of sun and vigilance, eyes you with a practiced, weary suspicion. You present your credentials, a carefully crafted lie about an old case, a missing person with a tangential link to this desolate stretch of land. He grunts, gestures vaguely towards a back room, a repository of forgotten files and dusty memories. You navigate the labyrinthine corridors, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, past other officers engrossed in their duties, their faces impassive. You begin your methodical search, pulling out logbooks, incident reports, anything that might shed light on the journalist's presence, on Ethelred Industries' activities in this remote locale. A specific patrol report catches your eye, dated weeks before the journalist's murder. It details an unusual nighttime incident, a perimeter breach, swiftly contained, with no further details. The coordinates listed are eerily close to a remote research facility, a subsidiary of Ethelred Industries, marked on one of the journalist's maps. Suddenly, the lights flicker, plunging the room into a momentary, disorienting gloom. A low thud reverberates from the main office. Before your eyes can fully adjust, the door to the archive room swings open, not with the familiar creak of the old wood, but with a forceful shove. A figure fills the doorway, a silhouette against the dim light of the corridor. Tall, broad, radiating an unspoken menace. You don't need a name to understand his purpose. He is here for you. Your hand instinctively drops to your side, seeking the reassuring weight of the weapon you no longer carry. But years of instinct are not easily shed. Your eyes dart, assessing the room, the single exit, the heavy filing cabinets. You've dug too deep, Marcus Thorne, a voice rumbles, low and gravelly, devoid of inflection. It's not a question, but a pronouncement. The air crackles with unspoken threat. Without a word, you react. Your foot connects with the bottom drawer of a heavy metal cabinet, sending it screeching open, spilling its contents, creating a sudden, chaotic barrier. The figure lunges, but you are already moving, a blur of motion honed by countless close calls. You burst from the archive, not towards the main exit, but deeper into the station, towards a lesser-used service entrance you'd noticed earlier. The figure is behind you, his heavy footsteps echoing in the narrow corridor. You hear a shout from the main office, a confused query, but no immediate pursuit from the uniformed officers. It's as if they are blind, or perhaps, complicit. You crash through the service door, the desert sun blinding you for a moment. A utility vehicle, a beat-up pickup truck, sits idling near the fence, its engine a low growl. Your mind makes a lightning-fast calculation. Its keys are likely in the ignition. You sprint, a desperate surge of adrenaline fueling your legs. A shot rings out, a sharp crack that tears through the vast emptiness of the desert. The bullet gouges a line in the dust beside your foot. You reach the truck, rip open the door, and slide behind the wheel, your hands already fumbling for the ignition. The engine roars to life. You slam your foot on the accelerator, tearing away from the station, kicking up a plume of sand and gravel. Another shot, this one shattering the rear window, sending a shower of safety glass across the cab. You swerve violently, fishtailing the truck, throwing off his aim. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, your heart a frantic drum against your ribs. They knew you were coming. They were waiting. This wasn't intimidation, it was an execution attempt, narrowly averted. The stakes have just been raised, not to a game, but to a fight for your very survival. And for the first time in years, you feel truly alive, truly determined. Each word a whisper from a past you thought buried, each diagram a shadow stretching towards your own fractured reflection. Beneath a stack of financial ledgers, tucked into a false bottom of a worn leather briefcase, you find it, a small, unassuming spiral-bound notebook. Its cover, a faded olive drab, seems to hum with a low, insistent frequency only you can perceive. You open it, the spine creaking softly, and the first page reveals not a journal, but a meticulously coded log. Most mean nothing to you, a jumble of intelligence jargon. But then, midway down a page, a single entry seizes your breath, stealing the air from the small room. Obsidian 07, source query on Delta protocol failure. Asset relocation confirmed to Sector 7 Alpha. The letters, stark and unforgiving, burn into your vision. Obsidian. The name alone is a shard of glass in your gut, a bitter echo from the graveyard of your career. Operation Obsidian. The sting operation you led, years ago, meant to dismantle a network of high-level corruption. The one that imploded, taking your badge, your reputation, everything with it. You remember the official report, a carefully crafted narrative of unforeseen complications, compromised assets, and your own alleged misjudgment, but Delta Protocol? You had never heard that term and Sector 7 Alpha? The journalist wasn't just investigating a politician, they were digging into your downfall. Not the surface story, but the subterranean currents, the hidden levers that truly brought Operation Obsidian to its knees. Why the cover-up? Overseer Delta. The name strikes you with the force of a physical blow. It was the call sign for the lead intelligence handler on Operation Obsidian, a man you trusted implicitly, a mentor whose word was iron. The Chief of Operations. He was the one who presented you with the official findings, the one who looked you in the eye and delivered the verdict of your culpability. His betrayal, if this scratched note is to be believed, runs deeper than the desert's deepest aquifer. He hadn't just stood by, he had been an architect of the lie. The room feels smaller, the air suddenly thick with unseen dust motes dancing in the meager light. This isn't just about justice for a stranger anymore. It's about reclaiming your own truth, dismantling the edifice of deceit that has defined your exile. The determination that fueled your initial search hardens, sharpening into a cutting edge. You gather the notebook, tucking it securely within your jacket. The journalist's room, once a canvas of a life unknown, now feels like a direct accusation. You move with a renewed urgency, the ghost of betrayal nipping at your heels. The sun has begun its descent, painting the sky in hues of bruised purple and orange as you leave the city behind, the rumble of the engine a counterpoint to the insistent beat of your heart. Hours later, the landscape shifts, blurring into an endless expanse of ochre and sagebrush. The air grows thin, carrying the scent of dust and distant mesquite. The headlights cut through the encroaching dusk, illuminating a desolate highway that seems to stretch into infinity. Finally, a cluster of low-slung, utilitarian buildings emerges from the barren terrain, stark against the bruised twilight sky. The station hums with the low thrum of generators and the distant chatter of radios. You walk into the main office, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, casting a harsh, unfeeling glow. He hesitates, glancing towards a closed door at the back. He's busy, sir. Is this official? It's personal, you reply, your gaze unwavering. And it's about Operation Obsidian. The name hangs in the air, a silent alarm. The agent's composure cracks. He makes a quick call, his voice hushed, before pointing you down a short, drab corridor. He'll see you. Through that door. You push open the heavy door, revealing a cramped office dominated by a large, metal desk. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, now hold a guarded wariness. He is older, lines etched deeper around his mouth, but the essence of the chief of operations, the man who shaped your career and then presided over its ruin, remains. Marcus, he says, his voice flat, devoid of warmth. He doesn't offer a hand. I heard you were around. What brings you to Sector 7 Alpha? Lost your way? A faint, bitter smile touches his lips. I found something, you say, stepping closer, the spiral notebook heavy in your jacket. Something that suggests Operation Obsidian wasn't the failure we were told it was. Something that suggests Delta Protocol was a deliberate sabotage. You watch his eyes, searching for the tell. His jaw tightens imperceptibly. That's old history, Marcus. Classified. You know the rules. You're not authorized. The journalist knew, you counter, the words a challenge. They were digging. And they mentioned Overseer Delta in connection with a cover-up. A muscle twitches in his cheek. He leans forward, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous growl. You're chasing ghosts, Marcus. Dangerous ghosts. Some truths are better left buried. For everyone's sake. He pauses, his gaze locking onto yours, a silent warning. Especially yours. Don't dig where you shouldn't. He isn't denying it. He's threatening you, invoking the very failure he helped engineer. The air crackles with unspoken history, with the weight of years of carefully constructed lies. You see it now, clear as the desert sky. The man you once trusted, the architect of your downfall, is deeply entwined in the very conspiracy you now seek to unravel. The personal connection is a knife in your back, twisting with fresh pain. You came for answers, but found only a deeper, more agonizing betrayal. The desert sun, a molten coin, hung low over the horizon, painting the vast expanse in bruised purples and fiery oranges. Your boots scuffed against the gritty concrete of the compound, each step a testament to the stubborn resolve hardening within you. The words from the last encounter still echoed, a discordant chime in the silent canyons of your memory, confirming the intricate web of deceit you now faced. He was a man carved from the same hard landscape, lines etched deep around his eyes, a weariness clinging to his shoulders like dust. He was the officer who had processed the initial reports of the journalist's disappearance, a footnote in your past, now a crucial, trembling thread. He didn't look up as you entered, his gaze fixed on a worn map tacked to the wall, charting invisible borders. "You know why I'm here," you stated, your voice a low rasp that cut through the silence. He finally shifted, his eyes, the color of faded denim, meeting yours. Marcus Thorne. The ghost from the past. His words were heavy, laced with a shared history of unspoken fears. You should have let it lie. Some things are better buried deeper than the desert sand. Some things demand unearthing, you countered, stepping closer, your shadow falling over his desk. On it, a half-empty mug of coffee, a stack of forms, and a small, innocuous USB drive, half hidden beneath a crumpled report. Your gaze lingered on it, a magnetic pull. She came to you, didn't she? The journalist. Before she vanished. He flinched, a subtle tremor in his jaw. She asked questions. Too many. About movements. About things that weren't on any official ledger. And you helped her, you pressed, the pieces clicking into place. You gave her something. A lead. A way in. He shook his head, a gesture of denial that lacked conviction. I just pointed her to the anomalies. The system. It's broken, Marcus. The higher you climb, the less you see of the ground. The less you care. He paused, then, with a sigh that seemed to deflate him entirely, he pushed the crumpled report aside, fully exposing the USB drive. She came back. Weeks later. Left this with me. Said if anything happened. To get it to someone who would listen. Feared what it contained. It was unremarkable, common, yet it hummed with the weight of untold secrets. What is it? Everything, he breathed, a single word laden with the gravity of a tombstone. Names. Dates. Routes. The politician. His campaign. The funds. The organization they're tied to. It's all there. Encrypted. She said the key was in her last article draft, the one that never saw print. A phrase. A sequence of words. Your fingers tightened around the drive. This was it. The thread, finally tangible, leading directly into the heart of the labyrinth. You knew the journalist's work, her subtle genius. The key would be hidden in plain sight, a poetic cipher. Back in your rented pickup, the digital hum of your old laptop was the only sound. The desert night had swallowed the last vestiges of light, leaving you cocooned in the inky blackness, illuminated only by the screen's pale glow. You found the draft online, cached deep within an obscure server, a digital ghost. It was a searing exposé on corruption, but seemingly unrelated to the border. Then, you saw it. The screen flickered, a cascade of green text, then settled. A folder opened. Inside, not just a single document, but an entire archive. Spreadsheets, coded communications, scanned images of ledgers, audio files. The sheer volume was staggering. You clicked on the first file, a detailed financial ledger. The numbers swam before your eyes, then solidified into damning clarity. Shell corporations, offshore accounts, colossal sums funneled through seemingly legitimate channels, all converging on the politician's campaign. Another file, an intercepted communication, laid bare the journalist's final days. He had been close, too close. The cargo was not drugs, but data, stolen from secure government networks, sold to the highest bidder to manipulate elections and control public opinion. The journalist had uncovered the pipeline, the source, and the ultimate beneficiary, the politician, funded and empowered by the Serpent and Rose organization, using the stolen data to orchestrate his ascent to power. The failure that had cost you your badge, the carefully constructed lies that had defined your downfall, they were all part of this larger design. Your past wasn't just invoked, it was a deliberate sacrifice, a piece moved on their grand chessboard. You looked at the screen, the scrolling names, the damning evidence. This was bigger than you, bigger than your redemption. It was a systemic rot, threatening to consume the very foundations of justice. The personal cost would be immense, a gauntlet of dangers you could barely imagine. They would come for you, no doubt. The path ahead was treacherous, fraught with unseen enemies and impossible odds. Yet, the truth, stark and undeniable, burned brighter than any star in the night sky. You would not turn back. You would not let it lie. The journalist deserved justice. The country deserved the truth. And you, Marcus Thorne, would be the one to deliver it, no matter the cost, even if it meant sacrificing everything you had left. You closed the laptop, the glowing screen replaced by the vast, silent challenge of the desert night. Your commitment, now, was absolute. The journalist's drive lay heavy in your palm, a small, cold promise. You inserted it, the click a tiny tremor in the stillness. Her work, a web of subtle genius, now unfurled across your screen. File after file, neatly organized, yet nothing immediately screamed smoking gun. You knew her method, her penchant for the oblique, the artful misdirection. The key would not be a direct confession, but a whisper woven into the fabric of her meticulous research. You scrolled through financial ledgers, political donations, redacted reports. Each document a piece of a larger, unseen mosaic. No captions, no obvious links. But the journalist, he had a way. You remembered an article she'd written about ancient cartography, how constellations were once used to chart terrestrial paths. A long shot, but your gut tightened. A sharp, insistent vibration ripped through the quiet. Your burner phone. You answered. Marcus, they know, a familiar, gravelly voice rasped. It was the detective, your former colleague, his voice laced with an urgency you hadn't heard in years. Your vehicle was flagged an hour ago. A warrant, official looking, for obstruction of justice. They're calling it a flight risk. You're a ghost now, Thorne. The line went dead, leaving an echo of accusation and a stark new reality. Fugitive. The word tasted like ash. They weren't just watching anymore, they were actively hunting. The net was closing, tighter than you'd anticipated. Your fingers flew across the keyboard, a sudden clarity sharpening your focus. The constellation overlay clicked into place. 3 stars, dim end. Unremarkable, perfectly aligned with 3 specific points on the desert landscape. One of those points was eerily close to a structure marked on the blueprint, a remote facility, its purpose obscured by its sheer isolation. The last star, the brightest in the journalist's chosen cluster, pointed directly to a location you now recognized from the news, a place often in the headlines for its ceaseless activity. This was it. The journalist hadn't hidden a message, he had hidden a destination. Or where a critical piece of evidence had been moved, processed, or simply observed. Your mind raced, piecing together the fragments, the politician's campaign, the high-echelon strings, the journalist's relentless pursuit of truth. This station, a nexus of movement and surveillance, made a terrible, terrifying kind of sense. There was no time for contemplation, no room for doubt. You had to move. The pickup's engine roared to life, a guttural promise of escape and pursuit. You drove, the landscape blurring into a monotonous canvas of sand and scrub brush under the relentless afternoon sun. Every vehicle you passed became a potential threat, every distant glint of chrome a possible tale. Your eyes constantly scanned the rearview mirror, your knuckles white on the steering wheel. You cut the engine a mile out, pulling the pickup off the main road, tucking it behind a ridge of sun-baked rock and brittle creosote bushes. The air was still, heavy with the scent of dust and distant mesquite. From your vantage point, the station was a fortress of activity. Trucks rumbled in and out, their headlights cutting swaths through the deepening twilight. Uniformed figures moved with purpose, their silhouettes stark against the artificial glow. This wasn't just a checkpoint, it was a nerve center. You needed to get closer, to understand the rhythm of the place, to find the seam in its defenses. The journalist's satellite photos had shown a less guarded perimeter on the south side, a maintenance access road barely visible through the dust. That was your entry point. Your breath hitched. It slowed, its powerful beam methodically sweeping the landscape, inch by painstaking inch. They weren't just patrolling, they were searching for you. The beam lingered, a searing eye, on the very ridge where you'd left your truck. You were Marcus Thorne. Disgraced, hunted, but not broken. Not yet. You were closer than ever, the truth within reach, hidden somewhere within that humming, fortified structure. You were no longer just investigating, you were fighting for your life, and the shadow of a vast, unseen power was tightening around you, eager to extinguish the last flicker of your pursuit. The journalist's drive, now a part of your machine, clicked into place, its cold promise unfolding across the screen. Lines of code, encrypted files, and meticulously organized folders blossomed from the tiny device. You saw the careful architecture of her mind, a fortress built against deceit. Her initial reports, the ones dismissed as conjecture, now stood as foundational stones. You navigated through layers of obfuscation, past proxy servers and dummy corporations, until the true narrative began to coalesce, sharp and undeniable. Here, in the stark, digital light of her investigation, lay the true mechanics of their influence. Shell companies, like hollow husks, funneled illicit funds into the campaign of the prominent politician, an intricate dance of dark money and political leverage. You traced the flow of capital, a serpentine path from offshore accounts to domestic PACs, each transaction a silent betrayal of public trust. Then, a hidden folder, marked with an obscure string of characters, revealed itself. Your breath hitched. The journalist had found him. He had secured his testimony, a direct account of the organization's enforcers silencing dissent, of threats delivered, of a specific backroom deal struck with the politician's inner circle, long before his campaign gained national traction. This witness, a low-level operative who had grown a conscience, spoke of a particular meeting in an abandoned factory outside the city, where the politician, then a lesser-known figure, had pledged allegiance in exchange for the organization's vast, unseen machinery. He detailed the specific methods of vote manipulation, the blackmail material gathered on rival candidates, the systematic dismantling of any opposition. It was all there, laid bare, the motive for the journalist's murder, the reason for your career's implosion. He was on the cusp of exposing this precise nexus of power and corruption, the very moment the politician's trajectory was becoming irreversible. The files also contained a series of encrypted communications, a timeline of exchanges between the politician's campaign manager and a figure identified only by a codename, a name that recurred in the witness's testimony as the true architect behind the organization's operations. This was it. The undeniable proof. Enough to tear down the entire carefully constructed edifice. But releasing it conventionally wouldn't work. You knew their reach, their ruthless efficiency. This required a different approach, a calculated gamble. The isolation of this place, miles from anywhere, was both a shield and a cage. You began to craft your message, not for public consumption, but for specific eyes. A digital breadcrumb, carefully placed, encrypted to ensure only those with the key, those at the heart of the conspiracy, could decipher its precise location. It contained a fragmented piece of the evidence, just enough to confirm you possessed the whole, enough to demonstrate the imminent threat to their entire operation. Your finger hovered over the send button, the screen's blue light reflecting in your eyes. You knew what this meant. You weren't just exposing them, you were baiting them. The mastermind, the one behind the codename, would not tolerate such a direct challenge. He would come for you. They all would. A ghost of a smile touched your lips, grim and resolute. You were walking into a trap, yes, but it was a trap of your own making, in a place of your choosing. The vast, indifferent desert outside would bear witness. The air in the small room grew taut, heavy with the weight of your decision. You hit send. The email vanished into the ether, a silent declaration of war. The hum of the server racks continued, but now, beneath it, you heard a new sound, faint but growing. The distant thrum of an engine, approaching from the endless expanse of the desert. Your move had been made. The game had truly begun. The screen, a pale blue eye in the dim room, flickered. A hidden directory, a ghost in the machine, materialized. Your fingers, calloused with years of keyboard battles and holster friction, danced across the keys, a silent melody of decryption. You knew this dance, the rhythm of breaking through digital walls, a skill honed in forgotten cases. The files unfurled, a tapestry woven from shadows and lies. A ledger, precise and damning, detailed illicit transfers, a web of shell corporations funneling dark currency into the politician's campaign. Each entry, a nail hammered into the coffin of his public image. A video file. You clicked. The screen glowed, illuminating the lines etched around your eyes. The murder, once dismissed as a random act, was a calculated execution, orchestrated by the very architects of power you hunted. A sudden, sharp thud from outside the station's reinforced door startled you. They knew. They always knew. Your fingers flew, initiating a broadcast sequence, a dead man's switch for the digital age. The files, the ledger, the communications, the video, all began to upload, a silent scream across the global network, set to detonate in minutes. The door, heavy and steel reinforced, groaned inward. Not kicked, but opened with a key, a testament to their reach. The one in the lead, a woman of severe elegance, her gaze like chipped obsidian, was the strategist, the true mastermind's direct hand. Behind him, two enforcers, silent and imposing, their presence radiating a quiet menace. Marcus Thorne, the strategist's voice was a silken blade, cutting through the hum of your laptop. Always digging in the wrong places. You stood, the pistol a steady extension of your arm, pointed not at him. At the laptop. And always finding what you bury. Your voice, though rough from disuse, held a new resolve. The journalist wasn't just chasing a corrupt politician. They were chasing you. Chasing the organization that bought him, that built his campaign on a foundation of illicit wealth. Her lips, painted a stark crimson, curved into a mirthless smile. A tiresome pursuit. And ultimately, a futile one. Her eyes flickered to the laptop screen, where the upload bar crept forward. You think a few files can unmake what we have built? I think a few files can burn it to the ground, you countered, your gaze unwavering. The politician's complicity, clear as day. It's all here. It's all going out. We control the narrative. We always have. Not anymore, you growled, your finger tightening on the trigger, not for her, but to protect the fragile progress bar. The world will know who murdered the journalist. They'll know who funded the politician with blood money. They'll know the names, the dates, the bank accounts. Every piece of evidence the journalist painstakingly collected, and what I've pieced together, is about to become public domain. The strategist's eyes narrowed. Stop the upload. It was a command, not a request. Can't, you said, a grim satisfaction in your tone. It's on a timer. And even if you smash this machine, it's already mirrored. A dead man's switch. You could have been useful. She nodded subtly to her enforcers. They moved with practiced efficiency, a silent, deadly ballet. You ducked under the first swing, the air displaced by the enforcer's fist whistling past your ear. Your pistol, still aimed at the laptop, became a pivot. You spun, using the momentum to slam the butt of the weapon into the second enforcer's ribs. A grunt, a momentary stumble. The first enforcer was on you, a powerful arm wrapping around your neck, cutting off your breath. The air grew thin, spots dancing at the edge of your vision. You struggled, kicking, twisting, but their grip was like iron. Your free hand scrabbled for purchase, finding the edge of the desk, then the laptop itself. The sound of the upload completing. A small, triumphant chime from the speakers. The screen flashed a confirmation message, asterisk upload complete. The enforcer's grip tightened, a final, crushing squeeze. You had done it. The truth was out. Justice, in its own brutal way, was finally being served. Even as your vision blurred, a faint siren wailed in the distance, a sound that might be salvation, or merely the next wave of the storm. The desert night, vast and indifferent, waited to see which it would be. The crushing grip, a vice of bone and muscle, slackened. Air, sharp and cold, clawed its way back into your starved lungs. The world reeled, a kaleidoscope of splintered light and shadow, yet the burning image of the completed upload, the truth unleashed, remained indelible behind your eyes. You had done it. A cacophony erupted around you, shouts, the sharp crackle of static, the whine of approaching sirens growing in intensity. Your body, a symphony of aches and tremors, struggled to obey. You registered the heavy weight of the enforcer's unconscious form slumping away, the sudden absence of pressure a stark relief. Through the haze, you saw them, figures in tactical gear, weapons raised, swarming the confined space. Hands, firm and professional, took hold of you, guiding you, supporting your faltering steps. The metallic tang of fear and adrenaline still coated your tongue, but beneath it, a nascent sense of vindication began to bloom. Each bump sent a fresh wave of agony through your ribs, a sharp reminder of the price paid. Then, the destination materialized from the pre-dawn gloom, a low-slung, utilitarian structure, stark against the emerging ochre hues of the horizon. The air inside was cool, recycled, a sharp contrast to the biting wind outside. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on cinder block walls and worn linoleum floors. The scent of disinfectant mingled with the faint, persistent aroma of stale coffee. A border patrol agent, his face etched with fatigue and a watchful intensity, directed you to a metal chair in a small, windowless room. He was a man of few words, his gaze assessing, calculating. Marcus Thorne, he stated, his voice flat, devoid of inflection. A lot has happened tonight. A lot. He offered a lukewarm cup of water, his eyes never leaving yours. You swallowed, the water a balm to your parched throat. The upload, you rasped, your voice rough, did it? Did it go through? He nodded slowly, his lips pursing. Oh, it went through, Mr. Thorne. Like a wildfire. He gestured vaguely towards a small, wall-mounted television screen in the corner of the room, previously unnoticed. The volume was low, but the frantic energy of the news anchor was palpable even from across the room. You turned your head, pain lancing through your neck, and fixed your gaze on the screen. The images flickered, a montage of your actions, of the warehouse, of the politician's smiling face now juxtaposed with grainy screenshots of encrypted documents. Now clearer, spoke of an unprecedented data leak, of a whistleblower's audacious act. They showed footage of the politician. His usually composed demeanor shattered, facing a barrage of questions from a throng of reporters. His denials were weak, his eyes betraying a profound, desperate fear. The fabric of his carefully constructed reality was tearing at the seams, unraveling for the world to see. A profound weariness settled over you, deeper than any physical pain. This was it. The public reaction. The world was waking up to the truth, a truth you had fought tooth and nail to unearth. A grim satisfaction settled in your chest, a quiet triumph that tasted like dust and vindication. The strategist, you managed, pushing the name past your lips. Was she? The agent's expression remained impassive. She slipped away in the confusion. A professional. Left behind a trail of misdirection. But we have the enforcer. And we have the data. The kind that reshapes landscapes. You watched the television, the endless loop of breaking news, the pundits dissecting every detail. The journalist's name, the one whose unsolved murder had haunted your every waking moment, was finally being spoken again, not as a forgotten victim, but as the first domino in a chain of revelations. Her integrity, once questioned, was now undeniably clear. A quiet tribute, a silent promise kept. The agent pushed a form across the table. Standard procedure. Statements. Medical assessment. You're injured, but stable. You'll be staying with us for a while, mister, for your protection, and as a material witness. You nodded, the world outside this sterile room a whirlwind of justice and retribution. The personal cost was immense. Redemption was not a sudden burst of glory, but a slow, arduous climb, leaving you bruised and battered, yet undeniably resolute. The fight was far from over, but the first decisive blow had been struck. The desert air, thin and sharp, bit at your exposed skin, a stark contrast to the recycled chill of the room you'd just left. The vast, indifferent landscape stretched before you, a canvas of endless sand and distant, jagged mountains, mirroring the vastness of the truth you had helped unearth. The immediate aftermath was a symphony of clipped radio chatter and the distant thrum of engines. The politician, his carefully constructed facade shattered, was now a name whispered with contempt, his campaign dissolved into scandal. The journalist, whose pursuit of truth had cost him his life, was no longer a forgotten victim but a martyr whose sacrifice had brought down giants. You ran a hand over the stubble on your jaw, the grit of the desert already clinging to your skin. The aches in your body were profound, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that settled into your very marrow. Your mind, once a storm of fragmented clues and gnawing doubt, felt strangely calm, like the eye of a hurricane after it has passed. The ghost of your past failures, the weight of that one unsolved case that had cost you everything, no longer hovered at your shoulder. It was not entirely gone, perhaps, but it had receded, diminished by the undeniable light of a larger truth. Redemption. You hadn't sought it, not truly, not consciously. You had sought justice, a simple, brutal equation of righting a wrong. Yet, in that relentless pursuit, redemption had found you, a quiet, unexpected passenger on your arduous journey. A figure approached, their boots crunching on the gravel. She stopped beside you, her gaze sweeping the horizon before settling on your profile. "They're taking the senator into custody," she stated, her voice low, devoid of triumph, merely stating fact. "And the others? The names you gave us, the connections, they all checked out." "Every single one." You offered no reply, just a slow nod. The journalist's murder had not been a random act of violence, as it had been so easily dismissed all those years ago. The initial report, doctored and suppressed, had been the first domino in a long chain of deceit, a chain you had finally severed. "Your old badge, Thorne," the agent continued, her voice softer now. "It might not mean what it used to, but what you did. It means something else entirely." She paused, then offered a small, almost imperceptible smile. "There are talks. About consultancy. About a different kind of role. If you're interested." The offer hung in the air, a sliver of a future, a path you hadn't dared to imagine. Your gaze drifted back to the horizon, where the last sliver of sun dipped below the earth, painting the sky in a final, fiery flourish. The idea of returning, even in a different capacity, stirred something within you. Not the old hunger for the badge, but a quiet resolve, a sense of purpose that had been dormant for too long. The cost had been immense, yes. Your body ached, your mind was frayed, and the solitude of your journey had been profound. But the truth, once buried, now stood revealed, stark and unyielding against the vastness of the desert night. You had faced your personal demons, the specters of failure and regret, and you had not faltered. You had confronted powerful enemies, those who believed themselves untouchable, and you had seen them brought to heel. A new path. It would be uncertain, perhaps even more dangerous in its own way. The forces you had battled were deeply entrenched, their tendrils reaching far. But you were no longer the man haunted by the past, shackled by what-ifs. You were a man forged anew in the crucible of relentless pursuit, tempered by the stark realities of justice. The weight in your chest, a constant companion for years, had finally lifted. The silence stretched, profound and liberating. You turned to the agent, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching your lips. "I'll think about it," you said, your voice raspy but firm. The words were not a dismissal, but a promise. A promise to yourself, to the journalist, to the very fabric of justice you had fought so hard to mend. The night was falling, but within you, a quiet, determined light had finally ignited.